Hello, greetings, and welcome out there in podcast land. You have reached Johnny Has the Keys. I am David, and I'm here with my good friend Tim. Hey, Tim.
Hey, David.
And we are so glad you guys are listening to us. We get together once a week, and we try to look at a movie, talk about the keys in that movie, meaning the influences, things that influenced it, what it influenced later on, how it influenced us. The key development points, all of those kind of things, and hence the title of this lovely podcast. And we're so glad you're listening to us. Tim, what have you been up to? Has it been anything exciting this week other than lots of cold weather?
Well, in my genre-related week, I happened to stumble upon a little series I've been wanting to see that's on HBO called The Outsider. Which,
Yep. That was going to be mine too. We both picked the same one, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it's not very surprising for me, considering that it is a Stephen King novel that I have read, and King continues to venture into supernatural crime type stories. Because the Mr. Mercedes trilogy that preceded this book features a character named Holly Gibney, who is also in The Outsider as another character. She's a great character, by the way.
Well, now, when did he write Outsider? Is it recent?
Well, yeah, it's not been too long ago. I don't think it's been 2 years since I read it.
Really?
It's
okay.
been fairly. I think that he's maybe had 2 books out since then, 1 or 2 out since then. So,
which for him is saying a couple
quick.
Of months. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But a lot of his stuff goes into. A lot of people buy his stuff before it's published now.
Mm-hmm.
So HBO could have had the rights before the book was released.
Okay. Yeah, because
what do you think?
Get it in gallery. I love it. It is so good. I mean, you had mentioned it to me, and you had said that it was like an extended. I think your 2 things were it was an extended X-Files episode, and it fills the void of Mindhunter, which is we both really like a lot, and I really like. And I could see both those elements in it. I think it's extremely well written and well acted and well directed so far. And I do like the fact that you have to wait. I like the fact that it's on HBO and it's not binge worthy. You don't get to just go and watch the entire thing. So I like that. It'll get me ready for Westworld. So because it's coming out for its 3rd season, it'll be the same way.
Yeah. It's also, there's a good sense of mystery to it, and it does start off as a crime mystery, but then slowly kind of segues into something that, you're like, wait a minute, how is this happening? And it just starts creeping into supernatural territory.
Right.
Is awesome, too.
And we probably don't want to spoil it because people listening to Wolfman don't know we're going to talk about that. But I agree. And I love the way it is such a great crime and mystery, and then slowly starts hinting at things. And it's just, it's very good. The casting is remarkable, I think, in both
and
male and female
they're
characters.
not really familiar faces, except for Jason Bateman. I don't know any of these actors, really. Do you?
Well, Mare Winningham, I knew her.
Oh, yeah.
And I had seen the lead, the investigator on this case, but could not place where I had seen him, and so I had to look him up and went, oh, okay, that's where I knew him from. So it's really, I am very impressed by it. I am. It's ironic that it's both of ours this week, but it is well worth it for anybody. So if you are out there listening, check it out. It is on HBO. HBO, which is, they don't have, in my opinion, HBO doesn't have the cred anymore like Netflix does now, but they do have some, really great shows.
Their original programming's always had the cred, pretty much, though, don't you think?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you can't really top Game of Thrones and
You
Westworld
can't top The Sopranos before that.
well, true. Sopranos. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Very good.
That's funny. I was laughing because I thought you were trying to make a segue. I was like, okay, how's he going to segue from HBO to 1941 Universal movie?
No, I was going to let you segue.
All right. It is the horror territory I love so much, and we are venturing into the foggy woods of England with a little gem from Universal in 1941, and it is called The Wolfman. Lon Chaney Jr. Actually has a great cast. It's also got Claude Rains, Ralph Bellamy, Bela Lugosi is in it. Practically an all-star cast for a horror movie when you think about it.
Some old gypsy lady. Yeah.
Oh, actually, that is, I think her name is Maria Uspensky, and she was a famous acting teacher in L.A. at the time. And she came back for the sequel as well. Yeah. I was going to get into that when we got to casting. But first, just a brief synopsis. Any of those of you out there not familiar with this iconic character, it is about a man named Larry Talbot who returns to his home, his ancestral home of England. His father is Sir John Talbot. Larry returns due to the death of his brother by hunting accident, and he meets a young lady named Gwen. They go get their fortunes read by some gypsies, and he's attacked in the night by a wolf. And here starts the legend of the werewolf. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead. You were finishing.
I was just going to say that this is one of the Universal monsters of the like 5 iconic ones that was not based on literature, as far as like Dracula or Frankenstein. A lot of the myths originated in this film, as well as its predecessor, the lesser successful Werewolf of London in 1935, which I can talk about a little bit too. But things, like the Silver Bullet and the Full Moon and wolfbane and things like that, a lot of that originated from Kurt Siodmak's original screenplay for this film.
Okay, my mind's like 9 different places. First of all, I was going to say, you had said, in case you're unfamiliar with this story, and I'm thinking, okay, who in North America, Europe, whatever, who would not be familiar with the Wolfman? It's such a class. It's like a vampire, a werewolf and vampire, and that kind of ties into like what you said of the Universal classic monsters, which is this is one of those, including. I mean, would that include like Creature from the Black Lagoon? That's a Universal?
Yeah,
right?
I think the Creature may be the final one of the originals.
But like Frankenstein, Mummy, Wolfman, Dracula,
and Creature.
Creature. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But okay, all that. So those are my first 2 thoughts. My third one, you just kind of segued perfectly to, was. My favorite part of this movie is the script. I think it is an extremely intelligent script. Even by today's standards, there are things in it I'm going, that's very clever. The way he wrote stuff, the way he threw out stuff and exposition without it seeming like exposition. I mean, there are other things that are very dated to me in it, but I think the screenplay's real. I cannot believe a studio at that time agreed to this screenplay. It seems way too, I think, intellectual, if that makes sense, for the time.
How so?
It goes into psychology, and it goes into the human brain, and there's a lot of I mean, even at the very beginning, isn't the first shot like the definition of lycanthropy? In the dictionary, and
Mm-hmm.
it's such a cool, just the way I mean, he talks about stigmata. He talks about what were my lines that I remember? I wrote them down in my notes. Hold on. Psychic maladjustment, diseases of the mind. I mean, it's just this very psychology influenced kind of storytelling. And I don't know.
There is a reason behind that.
Okay.
I don't know how to pronounce his name, Kurt Siodmak. It's Siodmak. He's a German guy. And the original screenplay was going to play it without makeup and whether or not it was real or not, or in his head. So that's where a lot of the psychology residual stuff is left in the script. Mm-hmm. Universal turned it into a monster movie.
Well, see, it could have been, if you went with that premise, you could actually do an updated version of that script and still play with a lot of that, I think. Where is he just suggestible? Did the gypsies hypnotize him? Is he going crazy, or did this really happen? You could really play that up because I really like the dialogue. I like the way it's written. I'm not a big fan of Lon Chaney Jr. I don't think he has the range, but I didn't think the same thing. I think the same thing about Bela Lugosi. I don't think he has very good range either. But like you said, great cast.
They're not Karloff, that's for sure.
Yeah, right. Well, and they're not Ralph Bellamy. They're Claude Rains. His whole, playing that father who's been estranged but wants to connect, but then suddenly he goes, grow some balls there, boy, or whatever. It's you're just imagining this kind of thing. The girl in it isn't treated as a total, I'm going to scream every 5 minutes kind of thing, which I thought was good.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So the characterizations I thought were really crisp and nice for this, especially for this time period, but even for, when was this, 41, even 10 years later.
It was 1941.
Yeah, even when we're doing, when we did War of the Worlds, and we talked about, she screams like every third scene.
And that happens a lot in 50s sci-fi bug movies too. So
right, yeah,
yeah.
So
let me give you a bit of background. I don't know too much about George Wagner, the director, but he did go on to do a lot of classic television. He did Batman and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. in the 60s. But Kurt Siodmak, he did the original screenplay. This dude is German, and he was an extra in Fritz Lang's Metropolis. And the reason he wanted to be an extra was to get Fritz Lang a script, because he wanted to be a screenplay writer. And he also wrote the book Donovan's Brain, which was made into a movie as well.
Yep, I remember that one.
I remember the name. I don't think I've ever seen it.
I don't think I have either.
I mentioned that he had put a lot of the psychology in the script originally, because you weren't going to know whether or not he was a real werewolf or not. But he also says that the plot is a metaphor for Nazism. Good men turn to evil.
Yeah, well, could
basically.
be. Yeah.
As far as other background things, it was an estimated $180,000 budget for a runtime of 70 minutes. It's a very short film. It was originally planned for Karloff. Apparently, Bela Lugosi campaigned for the role, but it ended up going to Chaney, probably because Karloff was busy, would be my guess.
But Karloff's in it. Oh, no, Karloff's not in it. Bela Lugosi's in it.
Right, no, Lugosi's in it.
Yeah.
Lugosi wanted the lead, but ended up with the Bela part. And I guess they just gave him the same name as his name, because his name is Bela in the movie, too.
We're making this for you. It's just for you, Bela.
It was filmed from October 27th through November 25th and released on December 12th.
Wow.
It's just crazy how they do that. It just blows my mind. And it was one of the top grossers of 1942. It came out just days after the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
That's
So
interesting.
it's wild to put yourself back in time and to think of what all was going on when this movie came out. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and to think, but well, and you mentioned that's just wild that they have that time frame. I agree with you, especially now with as much computer animation and everything in films, we end up with hearing about principal photography has stopped. Great, so they've got everything filmed. It'll be released in 17 months. And you're like, what? It's going to take you over a year to finish it? These guys were doing it in 2 weeks. Finishing the whole movie, edit it, make it, everything.
Well, and not to backtrack too far, but we were just talking about The Outsider being a good replacement or to fill the void of Mindhunter not being around. I don't know if you read recently, but Mindhunter has been suspended indefinitely because Fincher's busy. It takes a really long time to write a season, and he didn't want to hold the actors up from doing other things. So who knows when Mindhunter's coming back? It might be 4 years down the road.
Yeah, if ever. It may not.
Right.
I mean, but gosh, I hate that too because I loved that series. But then again,
in 1941, you can film a movie in a month and release it less than a month later.
Darn right you could. Merry Christmas. Here you go.
Yeah. And it's classic and iconic. Yeah.
Well, why? Okay, why? Let's go there then. That's a good bridge. Why do you think it is classic and iconic? Do you think it was a universal publicity machine? What did this movie scare you? Was it scary to you? And do you think it was scary back then in 41?
As a child, the makeup was scary to me, just like Frankenstein. So I would say Jack Pierce is a huge contributor to that right there. Because, he did all of the Universal monsters. I think. I'm not sure if he did The Creature or not.
I don't think he did.
We'll do that movie one day. Anyway, you were asking me about elements that make it classic and iconic. The tragedy, we've dwelled on this before. I mean, great horror is usually tragic. We mentioned it in a little side podcast we did for Patreon on Dracula. But, I mean, Frankenstein is a tragic story as well. So you're playing on the drama. With this, they added a love story that is a little more legit than the love story in Frankenstein, I think. Anyway,
I agree.
It happens fast, but, I mean, the movie's only 70 minutes long. It kind of has to happen fast.
Well, and I didn't so much think that it was a love story. You could tell there was he definitely was attracted to her. And you could eventually tell she was attracted to him. So much so that in their final scene together, she even says, I'll run away with you. Or whatever. But you didn't get a lot of romance, really, because she was engaged. There's a fiance involved here. So,
right. Speaking of her name in the movie is Gwen Conliffe. She's played by Evelyn Ankers, and as we segue into casting, I don't know if you knew, but her and Lon Chaney Jr. did not get along at all, but it's not apparent on the screen.
Really? I did not know that.
Well, a lot of people had problems with Lon Chaney Jr. He was notorious for being a prankster, a drunk, a wild kind of character. He used to, I can't think of who the other actor was that he was buds with, and they were always like getting drunk and destroying sets and stuff. Yeah, he had a bad reputation.
So it was kind of like the relationship with Peter O'Toole and Oliver.
Right. And I can't think of this actor. I can see his face, but he was a famous Western actor. You would recognize him. I may have written it down. I just don't see it right yet.
Well, and wasn't he friends with Douglas Fairbanks Jr. and that whole group?
If he was, I didn't read that. Damn, I cannot remember what that guy's name was. Oh well. I did. I read up a lot on Lon Chaney Jr. because I knew that there was he had this bad reputation, and
Okay.
which is ironic because he is the only actor to play a universal monster in every film. You know, Frankenstein ended up getting played by other people.
So he's Larry Talbot in every movie they do.
Yep, he was famous for saying the Wolfman's my baby. He played him 5 times in one decade.
Okay.
Yeah. Whereas Karloff didn't do Frankenstein. You know, actually, Bela Lugosi plays Frankenstein in the sequel to The Wolfman. The Wolfman meets Frankenstein. And then Glenn Strange took over the role when it started getting a little comical. And, of course, Dracula was played by John Carradine as well. Yeah.
Okay.
Lon Chaney Jr. And Lon Chaney Jr.'s name was really Creighton, but they dubbed him Lon Chaney Jr. because of his father's, infamy, and they wanted people they wanted to use it for billing.
Now, was that a Universal monster? Was Hunchback of Notre Dame a monster? Phantom of the Opera was. Right?
That's a good question. I think those are Universal movies because if not, they're owned by Universal for sure.
Seems like they would be.
I haven't gone back and watched those in a long time, especially the silent ones. And I think I added a couple of them to our list of movies for future seasons. So, and I don't know where we're going to find them. Hopefully there's some site out there that has these silent films on them because I really want to see them. Phantom of the Opera scared the crap out of me, the original.
Just a quick wiki search says that Lon Chaney, who did play Phantom of the Opera and Hunchback of Notre Dame, and did all the stuff with tape on his face and all that kind of stuff, was under contract at Universal Studios. So I assume both of those movies are Universals real quickly. So that's a horror legacy family, too. So that may have led to some of the attraction to this movie.
Broderick Crawford is the guy I was trying to think of.
Oh,
that was his bacon buddy.
That makes sense.
Sorry, I had to do a little quick search myself.
I mean, it's like I said, I wasn't very thrilled with his performance. I did think he was trying to play what Syed Mack wanted or whatever with the guilt and the I'm a cursed individual sort of thing. But it just didn't. I don't think he was very successful at it. I don't think he was very, very good at it. He was much better when he was doing the rogue part, trying to impress her and pick her up and everything else.
He was great at flirting with her. I was like, look at him go, man.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
a charmer for sure.
Yeah, so that definitely worked for him. But I think there was some issues with the depth that he could have played. I was amazed that there were only 2 monster scenes. Really, it seems when I remembered this movie, he was the monster like half the movie, and he wasn't. Right. There were really only 2 transformations.
There's other things from this movie that you think are going to be there that are not because they came in later. The face transformation, as you mentioned, is not there at all. You just see his feet transform.
Well, except at the very end when he changes back. It does time-lapse his face. Yeah.
It does there, but like in the future, they do facial time-lapses whenever he transforms.
Yeah.
It's really cool. Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention is that between, I guess, Karloff not doing it and Lon Chaney doing it, some guy named Dick Ferran was cast and was replaced just 1 week before they started filming with Lon Chaney. So somebody was cast before him. He was evidently second choice.
Okay.
Which is good for him, and I have no idea who Dick Ferran is. I guess I could look him up. But since I'm on casting, I don't have a lot of, like alternate casting roles. But we mentioned that he was played by Lon Chaney Jr. Sir John, his father, was Claude Rains, who is just a fantastic actor. And also, like you said, if you did say, played the Phantom in one of the Phantom of the Opera versions.
Wait, didn't he do? Was he in? I thought that was Herbert Lom. Claude Rains was Phantom.
Claude Rains did it in the 40s. Lom did it in like the 50s or 60s.
Oh yeah. Course, okay, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, because Herbert Lom was like a Hammer version.
He's the Hammer version. Yeah. Okay, you're right.
But Claude Rains was the first sound version, I think.
But Claude Rains was the Invisible Man.
Yeah, Riff Raff told me.
Yeah.
Claude Rains was the Invisible Man. Then something.
That's a great movie too that I would like to put on our list. This show is going to go on forever, I guess.
Yay!
Ralph Bellamy is Colonel Paul Montford. And for those of you that don't remember, Ralph Bellamy was still acting in the 80s in Trading Places with Eddie Murphy.
Okay. That was going to be my key because I saw him in those first two scenes and I was going, wait, who is that? Don't look it up. Who is that actor? Who is that? And I could not. And then in the third scene when he's going, well, you guys keep talking about all this and I'm going to go out here and hunt for wolves or whatever he said, right? I went, oh my God, it's Trading Places. That's the old man in Trading Places. So, yeah.
Well, my story's a little funnier because I was determined that he was in Cocoon. I was like trying to find information of him in Cocoon. And
that was Don Amici.
He's not in Cocoon.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. So, that's funny. And then I said Bela Lugosi played Bela, who was the original werewolf that actually bit Larry Talbot. And his mother, who was actually only 6 years older than Bela Lugosi, was played by Maria Uspensky, who was a very well-known and respected acting teacher in L.A. at the time. And she did return to the second film, Wolfman Meets Frankenstein, and reprised her role. Gwen Conliffe was played by Evelyn Ankers, who I said had an estranged relationship, to say the least, with Lon Chaney Jr., and really everyone else is kind of minor as far as the cast. I don't really have anything else casting-wise. Any notes or things stand out to you as far as the cast, other than Ralph Bellamy?
No, I thought overall, the entire, again, like I said earlier, I think the entire cast was good. I think they were strong. I didn't really like the way the gypsy lady was written, but I thought she was good in the part. That's the only dialogue I didn't really like, was her in that.
Let's talk about, before we go into some other behind the scenes things, what scenes stand out to you in this movie? What did you remember?
What did I remember going into it?
Yeah, you were saying you remembered some things that were actually probably from sequels. What was actually from this movie that you do remember?
I thought, going into it, I thought there was more monsters. I thought there was, more longer time as the Wolfman. I thought there was longer attacks. I seem to remember him being shot and falling down in all that fog, and then his body wasn't there because they hadn't shot him with a silver bullet. I did not remember any of the beginning of this movie. The whole coming home and the telescope and flirting with the girl and the cane.
Yeah, the telescope threw me. Telescope threw me big time. I was like, what is that giant telescope doing there? And really the only reason it's there is for him to see the girl and start, falling in love with her or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like you said, I seem to remember a direct facial transformation. I thought, and it freaked me out, I thought he escaped at the end because I knew there were sequels and I had seen sequels, and I thought he got away, not that he died. So I'll be curious to now have to go watch, I guess, Bride of Wolfman or Son of Wolfman or whatever, Wolfman 2, to see how he actually could live through being beaten with a silver cane like Bela was.
Well, I can tell you if you want to know because I watched it. I've watched a lot of werewolf movies. I watched the predecessor and I watched the sequel.
Yes.
The sequel, some grave diggers are in his crypt, and they're in his mausoleum. They open his crypt, and his body has not decomposed. So he's kind of immortal. And then the moonlight hits his body, and he changes and comes out after the gravediggers. That's how
rips
he
him to pieces.
Comes back. I can't remember. They run, though, that's for sure. But then he finds Frankenstein's body frozen, or not Frankenstein, the Frankenstein monster's body frozen in a block of ice, and he defrosts him, and they become friends.
Aww. And they hang out together in the sewers or in the foggy marshlands.
Yeah, and this time the monster's played by Bela Lugosi, and Lugosi is the one that basically started the whole Phil Hartman version of Frankenstein, where he just walks with his arms stuck out and goes, so that was more true. Lugosi than Karloff. I think that's hilarious, though, that Phil picked up on Bella's interpretation of it.
Okay.
And then I went back and watched the original Werewolf of London, and I have to say, it doesn't get as many marks on Rotten Tomatoes as this one, which is in the 90s. But it does get some high marks, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. There are some really cool things about that movie. It's a little more science fiction. It has a lot to do with botany. The lead character, played by Henry Hull, is a botanist, and he's in Tibet looking for this rare plant called Marisfa or something. I can't remember what it is, that only blooms in moonlight. And so the plant offers like a temporary antidote to turning into a werewolf, because he gets attacked by one while he's in Tibet. And that makeup was done by Jack Pierce as well, but they wanted to see Herman's face more, so that he had to pull back on it. So when he finally got to do the Wolfman 5 years or 6 years later, he went back to his original design, which they thought was too scary for the 35 version.
Okay.
Fascinating stuff. I've been reading about all this stuff all day today, actually.
Well, lots of hair, so I'm sure there was lots of hair and lots of spirit gum to do those transformations.
Yeah, it was yak hair, and they used a curling iron to singe it to get it tight.
I like the fact that he kind of walked on tiptoes to kind of simulate that bent dog hound leg kind of look.
Like a hoof. Yeah.
Yeah, well, you know how the dog's knees go backwards. So they go the other way. And so I thought that was cool. I think the design overall is great for a wolf man. I don't think it was really topped until, like my key would be Rob Bottin in The Howling, when they started changing the design of a werewolf to be more wolf than man kind of thing. Although a retro key for me was back in this one, because when he's originally bitten, it looks like a wolf. Looks like just a wolf, not a wolf man, not a Bela the gypsy as a wolf man. It looks like a wolf. And I thought that was weird, because he didn't turn into a wolf.
Yeah, it is weird, and that's a little bit of a continuity thing. And there's another stark continuity thing. I don't know if you noticed, but when Larry changes into the Wolfman the first time, he's in a white wife beater. But when he's running around in the woods, he's in a black long sleeve shirt.
And his pants are different too. My note is, so wait, he changed his shirt and pants to the darker look before he went out into the moors?
A werewolf would never be caught wearing that shirt.
Not wearing this. No, I may see my girl. Yeah. I need to look good for her. Or whatever. It was just so weird. But then he was wearing the exact same costume again in the other transformation. So I'm assuming they probably filmed the transformations at the same time. Maybe. Those two scenes. Maybe. Yeah. I thought these guys really need to do something about the atmosphere of their village, because it's very foggy all the time.
Well, and it
Why would
looks
they?
exactly like the village from Frankenstein a few years earlier, like a decade
It
earlier.
did. It did, except right in the middle of it is this Mondo Cathedral. I was going, how big is this town? Because those two old ladies come out of like this ginormous church. And I'm going,
There's
what?
Oh God, there's so much information on this film that I couldn't write it down. But that cathedral that represents what's supposed to be a smaller church is the actual cathedral steps from Phantom of the Opera, the silent version that his father was in.
That his father was in. Oh, wow.
Yeah,
So I wonder
yeah,
if he went and hung out on the set when he was a kid. You know? You think he did? I bet he
maybe,
did. I bet he
maybe.
went and hung out and
I
said,
would have.
Dad, let him beat you again or whatever. But yeah, I've got the note. That's a huge
You're
church for such
thinking
a
of
small.
Quasimodo. I'm talking about the Phantom. Oh, actually, you know what? Actually, you're right. I was wrong. I think it is
Hunchback.
the
Because it's a
Hunchback.
church.
Yeah, it was the Hunchback. It wasn't Phantom. You're right. It was
Phantom was the
Hunchback.
opera house. So yeah.
Yes.
Of course, it could have been the
Yes.
same
Yes.
steps.
I had
So.
it backwards. I did.
But
But when we were talking about elements that we remember or that stand out to us,
yeah.
the thing I remember the most, and I found out recently that this was all a soundstage, like a really large soundstage. But it's the scene in the woods with the fog and those trees. It's
Yes.
so creepy and so atmospheric. It's one of those things that stayed with me since I was a kid. And I read that they had the same trees and they had to move them around and make them look different so that the forest looked bigger than it actually was, or so that they could get different, angles and different places in the forest.
I did like, for those of you who are Patreon subscribers, we do a Star Trek thing. We always talk about Finnerman and his lighting. I liked some of the lighting in this, especially in those fog scenes. The way like he, in his transformation, you barely saw his face until he suddenly went up in between the branches, and then it was just like right across his eyes, the lighting. So it was very moody and scary, and I liked that. And there was one scene where they're all hunting him, and you just see the silver in people's eyes where the light's just reflecting off their eyes. The rest of them is in silhouette, like just black. And I liked some of the lighting in this. I thought it was really well done.
Mm-hmm. Back to the fog, Gwen, or what's her name? Gwen Conolith, the actress Evelyn Ankers, that scene where he's after her and then drops her in the fog or she faints or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I read that they forgot about her because you couldn't see her in the fog, and she passed out because they used some kind of chemical fog back then, and she basically, like, I guess got choked on it or something, and they didn't find her until they were cleaning up, like, after the scene was filmed.
Really?
Yeah.
They didn't say, we're missing an actress here,
Right. I read that in like 2 different sources, and I was like, damn, that sounds dangerous. But, c'est la vie.
Yeah.
What else? Another thing I remember the most is the poem, of course, which is recited pretty much in every film. Even a man who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright.
And she says that like 3 times, right? Or somebody says that. They all say it.
At least 2 or 3 different actors say it in the film.
The girl says it. The gypsy says it.
The gypsy says it, I think.
And then somebody else.
And like I think Claude Rains reads it, doesn't he? Out of a book or something.
Yeah, I think, or he quotes it.
They changed it from "and the autumn moon is bright" in latter films to something about when the moon is bright. They took autumn out of it. So that it didn't mean it only happened during a certain time of year, because they did try to start that myth of only on a full moon.
Okay. Yeah, because he says, I think somebody in the script refers to it as it only happens once a year or something. Or at a certain time of year, not a certain time of month. So yeah,
and a lot of people, a lot of people think that poem was taken from literature, and it's not. Kurt wrote that, especially for the script.
So wait, there was no werewolf myth before this movie? He actually created this? Is that what you're telling me?
No. He created a lot of the myths associated with cinematic werewolves. There was always myth about lycanthropy. Lycanthropy was a real word. But it was a lot of it was different. It was it had to do. Oh shoot! I just read this morning. It had to do with sorcery and someone deliberately turning themselves into a wolf.
Okay, because I know in
like a witchcraft
Buffy,
kind of thing.
One of my keys is Buffy because Oz is the werewolf in that series, and he was cursed. So I mean, no, he was bitten that he turned into it. But the angel character in that is cursed. So I mean, okay, because one of my keys I have on here is maybe like a retro key was Hound of the Baskervilles, which I always associated with being a werewolf. But then when I reread it a couple of years ago, it's not a werewolf. It's literally a big wolf, but it's not a werewolf. But that was 40 years before this sort of thing. So, so you're saying the myths, like the vampire myths, were always there. It's just that these writers ended up turning them into movies and creating more myth. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the moon stuff kind of came from Werewolf of London 6 years earlier because it dealt with a plant that only bloomed in the moonlight. And so when the moonlight would hit him after he had been bitten, he would turn. I don't think it had to be a full moon, though.
Okay.
So, and then I guess Kurt used a little bit of that. I don't think he didn't write Werewolf of London, I'm pretty sure. But so it took 6 hours to apply that makeup and 3 hours to remove it.
That makes sense. That's a lot of spirit gum. A lot of spirit gum. What do I have
the thing that I remember the most is not in this movie. The thing I remember the most is when it said that the werewolf instinctively seeks to kill the thing it loves best. And that is actually from Werewolf of London. It's not from the Wolfman.
Although he does see the pentagram on her.
Yeah. But I think that in that movie, in the Wolfman, it's because he sees it on his next victim or something.
Right. Well, that's what they say because Bela saw it on the girl. The first murder victim, whatever.
But that whole line, the werewolf instinctively kills or seeks to kill the thing it loves best, is part of the tragedy that I remember, and that why I relate or like this movie probably more than most of the Universal movies is because it's got that emotion to it, that resonance. Frankenstein has it too. Frankenstein, you feel sorry for the creature, but Dracula, not so much. Bela's kind of cold. He's not. You don't feel sorry for Dracula.
Right, and the creature.
You feel sorry for the mummy because the mummy is tortured.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Dracula's probably the least sympathetic.
I think I've got to admit, though, I never felt sorry for the mummy until the Hammer films, because the Hammer mummies I liked. They showed more of the past, I thought, and the whole you're going to be. You're going to be buried alive or cursed or whatever.
It's I can't remember because it's been so long. But in the original Mummy, don't they cut his tongue out?
Yeah, he can't speak.
Yeah. I mean, because they torture him and bury him alive or whatever. Yeah, so you do feel sorry for him a little bit.
Right.
And I think that's a strong element of the Universal monsters is that you relate to them somewhat. You do feel for them. They're not cartoon characters.
Right. And I think the thing that makes the Wolfman so good is he has his human days and everything. So he literally knows it's coming kind of thing. So that does make him a very, very cursed individual. It's not like he is always that way, like the mummy, like the creature from the Black Lagoon, like the Invisible Man. I mean, he can change, and not at will. It's not his will that's doing it, which is good. I always refer to my parent as father in every sentence I say. I had a problem with that. That was some of the script stuff I didn't like. Was that was very
some of the script stuff?
cliche.
Yeah, that's funny. I was going to say the same thing. I love when she goes, "Oh, look, wolfbane."
Yeah, just out of nowhere.
Like, oh, what a coincidence!
And we've just talked about that poem, haven't we? And the other one, I think the other one that got me was his father was saying, blah blah blah, but he's trying to convince his father, and he's saying, "Dad, look, I've got the scar," and he goes, "Well, any animal could have made that scar. It's a pentagram, for God's sake." Because he says it later. He goes, "I've got the pentagram scar." Any animal could bite you in the shape of a pentagram. They all do that.
And wouldn't an animal bite like an appendage? Why would it bite your chest? That always struck me as strange too.
And if it's going to bite your chest, why do you never ever show it? They just kind of glimpse it every day. They never do a close-up cutaway of it. They never do anything of the bite mark or whatever.
That's too risque. You can't see man's nipple.
Yeah, well, no, it's in the middle of his chest.
I can give you a little more trivia.
Yeah.
That I found a little funny. Claude Rains played the Phantom, and so did Lon Chaney Sr. So they both were the father to Lon Chaney Jr. in a sense, because he plays Lon Chaney's father in The Wolfman.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Silent film actor Gibson Gowland is a villager during Larry Talbot's death and was also in the death scenes of Phantom of the Opera in 1925.
Oh, okay.
So there was an extra in both films with Lon Sr. and Lon Jr.
I bet he used that at bars for the rest of his life. Yeah, I was in both of them. I was in both movies.
I know.
Yeah.
He was a drunk. I got drunk with him once.
Yeah.
Him and Roderick Crawford.
He hated that Evelyn Ankers girl. He hated her. Let me tell you.
Mm-hmm. He used to sneak up behind her with the makeup on and scare her all the time.
Yeah, but think about it. We would do that too. I mean,
I would do that in a heartbeat. Yeah. Before we move on to keys, I can mention that this movie made a certain list.
No, it did not.
List is?
It was the 100 movies. Yeah.
1,001 movies to see before you die.
Before you die.
A lot of the films we do.
That's great.
And then the version that I own is the Legacy Collection, and it won an award. The DVD. It's also got Werewolf of London, Frankenstein meets Wolfman, and She-Wolf of London, 1946, which I did not watch.
But not like Abbott and Costello fight the Wolfman or whatever.
No, but when I was a kid, I loved those movies too, and a lot of the actors came back for those, except for Karloff.
I noticed there's lots of music in this movie. A lot more than I would think you would have. There's music for all the transitions. There's music underscore in a lot of the scenes. And I wonder if they were doing that to try to get to that pathos, that emotional thing or whatever. It was very interesting. I noticed the amount of music in this movie. Most of my keys are, of course, things that have come from this movie. Are inspired by this movie, which is, other werewolf movies, of course. One of them that's sort of but not is the pentagram. As soon as they said pentagram and he sees his next victim, I thought of Dark Shadows. Because didn't Quentin see it? But he saw it on their forehead. in Dark Shadows. He saw his next victim on the pentagram on their forehead.
I don't really remember, but I do think that's in there somewhere.
Oh yeah. I couldn't.
And there's definitely a werewolf.
I couldn't believe I remembered Quentin Collins, who was the werewolf. But I remember he had those big 70s sideburns that came.
Yeah, David Selby. I mentioned a couple of podcasts back about Dark Shadows conventions, and he still does them with Laura Parker, who played Angelique. They're still
Isn't
around.
he like 200 or something? How does he do that?
Yeah. A lot of them are dead. Jonathan Frid just died a few years ago, but the ones that are left are still doing it. It's kind of their legacy. They don't have a lot more that was that well remembered.
Yeah.
I
have my favorite werewolf movie, which this one kind of reminded me of just because of the makeup, but they changed it out. But is again the Hammer one, Curse of the Werewolf, the one with Oliver Reed. Scares the dog
absolutely.
out of me. I love that movie, and he dies in the bell tower at the end, and it's just really good. Werewolf.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot too. I actually own that one.
Mm-hmm. I always remember the scene where he realized he was different because he kissed the baby bird to try to bring it back to life. The baby bird had been shot, and he tried to kiss it, and he liked the taste. I always remember that creeped me out. I was going, oh my God, that little kid's twisted.
I just realized why I didn't find my note earlier is because I wrote it down as a set key, but it says doorway and steps from church are from Hunchback 1923.
Oh, there you go. Yep.
Yeah.
We covered that. We knew it.
I have is for the Universal monsters in general. And I could think of two things. One is the Groovy Ghoulies cartoons of the 70s.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And the cereals from the 70s. Count Chocula, Frankenberry, and they had one called Fruit Brute that was a werewolf.
Oh, really? See, I don't remember that one at all.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. However, I do remember Quick and Quake, which were the two science fiction-y ones. One was like a little alien.
Mm-hmm.
I remember those serials. I have werewolves kind of foundered, I think, even after Hammer, until I guess it's the 80s, until like Howling and American Werewolf in London. When they started doing the advanced makeup effects and using the bladders and making the transformations seem like these huge, probably, in my opinion, probably as impactful at that time as these transformations were back then. You know what I mean?
I would say so. Yeah, it's like the equivalent. Whenever you hear someone guesstimate or estimate dollars, as far as inflation, I would say it would be the same as far as makeup effects.
Yeah.
Those were the equivalent to what people were seeing back then as far as being shocking and original and awesome.
Yeah, that transformation in American Werewolf is still great. So well done. The Howling is pretty good, and I like the Howling design for the werewolf better than because it looks like a werewolf. It doesn't look like a wolf. And in American Werewolf, he looks like a big wolf at the end.
He looks like Bela Lugosi.
Yeah. Right. Kind of full circle.
Yeah.
But there were a bunch of other ones that I remember that Rowie turned me on. Because Rowie's, if yours was zombies, mine is vampires, Rowie's favorite monster was always the werewolf. He just loved the werewolf. He wrote 3 different scripts about Werewolf Island. He loved werewolves. And he turned me on.
I want to be in that movie. Werewolf Island, man. That sounds awesome.
He turned me on to two that were like lesser knowns, I guess, at the time. But one was Dog Soldiers, which is basically about a platoon that is attacked by werewolves.
That's the guy that did The Descent, the movie that we opened with this season. Neil Marshall.
Yes, Descent.
He did Dog Soldiers. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other one was Ginger Snaps, the one where the girl becomes a werewolf. It's like a coming of age.
It's a group of girls, isn't it?
Or maybe it's more than one girl. Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I saw it, but yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I actually had written it down too. right next to Teen Wolf.
Oh, see, yeah, that makes. I had forgotten Teen Wolf because I repressed it. I never liked that. I remember what was the Landon one? Michael Landon was in. I was a teenage werewolf.
I was a teenage werewolf. That was the 50s, I believe.
Yeah, because he was a typical 50s cruiser kid kind of thing. Yeah. Our leather jacket. He had a leather jacket.
Sure did. I wrote down, and this is just, I'll just do a brief generalization, I guess. Any of the sequels and remakes. I mean, I've already mentioned that Werewolf of London came first. Then you also had Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman and She-Wolf of London. But you also have, like you said, the Curse of the Werewolf, which was the Hammer version. The latter movies, like American Werewolf and those are all I would consider either sequels or remakes, that kind of fall in line with the same film.
Mm-hmm. I also think that vampires and werewolves have become, since the 2000s, I think, very synonymous. I think Underworld had a lot to do with that, and probably literature at the time, but I couldn't tell you a novel. But this whole thing about they've coexisted in the world was a big deal that is still going on with all the Underworld sequels, and
I forgot about those.
Changed them all into lycanthropes or whatever, and there's always been this rivalry between them. And I remember when we used to play Masquerade, the vampire role-playing game, they had lycanthropes in that as well, which were the mortal enemies of vampires, which were werewolves.
And Anne Rice finally did it about 10 years ago. She did a couple books. One's pretty good, one's okay. It's not great. But she kind of started bringing her own touch to the legends and how they exist among us and things too.
And those were specifically werewolves?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were written in her latter years. I mean, she's still writing, I think. She did a couple of Lestat books in the last few years, but prior to that, she did a couple of werewolf books.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one of my last keys is Harry Potter. One of the teachers in Harry Potter is Lupin, and he turns out to be a werewolf. And he's a very sympathetic character and played as this cursed teacher and everything else. So I thought that was kind of interesting that she kind of, added that into her mythos.
Yeah. I have a few others. And I'm sure there's scads of others. I mean, this is one of those that we could probably just keep pulling them out of our butt all day. But the movie Wolf with Jack Nicholson and Michelle Pfeiffer, where he is a werewolf, that came out in the 90s, I believe. And then I also, it's not wolves, but I find the Cat People movies very similar to the werewolf.
Ooh, that's a really good key. And this legacy of ancient curse, and when it hits you, you can't prevent it. It has a lot of that werewolf element. That's pretty true. That's
cool. And speaking of a movie that we should probably put on the list, if I haven't, some of those Jacques Tourneur, Val Lewton collaborations. Cat People, Curse of the Cat People being one of them. Mm-hmm. That's something we should probably tackle eventually. Is that Universal? I don't know if it is or not.
I don't think so, but maybe.
Maybe. Who knows? But anyway, that's what I have for keys.
Me too.
So, anything else you want to close with as far as the Wolfman in 1941?
No, I mean, other than saying, because especially in the modern world, we hear a lot about, I don't want to watch it, it's in black and white. Oh, that's just an old movie. I think you have to appreciate some of these classics that we're watching. You have to watch them with the appreciation of a classic. the same way you would appreciate an era of painting or an era of even musical composition or sculpture. And the way the times reflected what they were doing in the genre at that time is true. And you have to appreciate that for what it is. And I hate that people don't watch the classics as much or go back to the classics because, like I was saying, I think you could take this screenplay with some modifications and retell it right now, and it would still be very powerful.
Oh, well, they tried to, and we neglected to mention it as a key, but they did The Wolfman with Benicio del Toro, but it did not do well at all.
I didn't see it, so I can't really tell you if it sucked or not, but it didn't look very good.
Yeah, they try to reboot these Universal monsters, and it's, with great, I have admiration for them trying, but it's really hard to replace the originals. I mean, they did that stupid Van Helsing movie with Hugh Jackman, and that had terrible Universal monsters in it. We also neglected to mention Penny Dreadful, which has some of these monsters in it as well.
Yes. Always watch Penny Dreadful. Excellent series. Watch the whole thing. It's got all of them, and they're great.
Is there a werewolf in that?
Yes.
Okay, I can't remember.
But it's only in one cursed scene, sort of thing. No, actually, no. He's the werewolf. The cowboy, one of the leads, is a werewolf. That's how they first. That's how he. No, it's in the first.
Oh no, you're right. Okay, no, I did see that.
He's like our introduction because that's how he gets noticed by the Lord and the witch, is because he commits the murders. Yeah, that's a good one. I'd forgotten about that, and I love that series.
Well, and I didn't mean to digress back into Keys, but back to what you were talking about, the appreciation for these legendary icons that, we wouldn't have these creatures if these movies didn't exist. Mm-hmm. And, I mean, even if you jump 30 years into the future, I mean, right now, Night of the Living Dead is not the greatest movie, but look what it has spawned. I mean, right. It started it all, just like, the Universal monsters started all these things that we've been talking about the last 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. They're well worth revisiting, and there are reasons why we still hold them close to our heart for having seen them on television as children. I can't encourage people to go out enough. We said the same thing last season when we did Frankenstein. I mean, that is a great movie. It's mm-hmm. a little funny in places because it moves so fast, but all of those movies at the time did. So
yeah, they didn't want to scare people.
And this one's got a lot of heart.
Yeah.
I think that's about all we can say about the Wolfman and Universal monsters in general. Highly recommended.
Highly recommended. And next week we'll be jumping, I think, back to a sci-fi world, don't we?
Absolutely. I think it's it may be a Bruce Willis movie.
Ooh, everybody
we'll let people think,
brains.
Well, could it be The Fifth Element, or could it be 12 Monkeys, or could it be Armageddon? Tune in
and see. Thanks, Tim.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.